Good evening. Welcome to the DeKalb Dems webinar this evening on when the lights stay on, but families fall behind. Across Georgia, families are doing everything right, working hard, budgeting carefully, cutting back where they can, and still falling behind because of out of control utility bills. We are excited this evening to have Patty Duran share her knowledge with us as to why this is the case for everyday Georgians. Patty is the founder of Georgians for Affordable Energy, a nonprofit focused on lowering utility bills and reforming the state agency in charge of regulating Georgia Power, the Georgia Public Service Commission. She has more than a decade of experience in the energy sector, including 10 years as director of the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative, a national nonprofit focused on grid moder- modernization. Patty was the 2022 candidate for the Georgia Public Service Commission. Again, we are so excited to have her speak with us this evening. I want to remind any people who are listening to please put questions that you have for Patty in the Q&A. Patty?
All right, thank you so much, Karen. Thank you everyone for joining us or for watching this recorded version. I'm going to be talking about why Georgia's #1 for data centers, but more importantly, I'm going to talk about some problems that we all know are happening. So first of all, high utility bills. Georgia Power bills are 5th highest in the nation and going higher. We have no to very little clean energy in Georgia, and the data centers coming to fill our state are making it worse. We'll get to that a little bit later. And speaking of data centers, there is no data center accountability. They are very much out of control, as we know. Why is this happening? I call it thing one and thing two. Thing one is Georgia legislators. They are not properly regulating Georgia Power and certainly not properly regulating data centers. By regulating, I mean passing legislation that would solve problems or prevent them from happening. That is literally their job. The other entity that is falling down on the job is the Georgia Public Service Commission, the state agency that Georgia legislators have created to regulate and manage a monopoly corporate utility, Georgia Power. Neither one of these state agencies or entities is doing their job. So some key problems that have happened because they're not doing their jobs are that industrial rates are far below the national average. And why did that happen? It's happening because in 2010, the legislature repealed the Consumer Utility Council. That's been a long sought goal by Georgia Power. Everybody knows it, but they couldn't pull it off until the Great Recession of 2010, when the state asked all agencies to cut their budgets by 10%. And so the Consumer Protections Bureau just cut this department completely out. Since its repeal, the rates for Georgia residential customers have increased 50% and far above inflation, whereas rates for industrials have barely budged. Let's see here, why my slide, here we go. And just to remind me, because I almost forgot, Georgia is one of only 5 states without a Consumer Utility Council. That is how critical a role it is widely understood to be. And that's because at commissions, there is a lot of lobbying. Georgia Power has lobbyists, the Georgia Manufacturing Association has lobbyists, industrials and data centers have lobbyists. Who don't have lobbyists? Residential and small businesses. That's what the role of the Consumer Utility Council was for. That is now gone. So here's a rate chart that I prepared to show you visually just how devastating it's been. You can see that since 2010, residential rates increased almost over 50%. It's a very big hidden cross subsidy. And here's another rate table where you can see the comparison to the national average. Why wouldn't data centers come here when they get rates that are 50% below the national average, almost 60%, whereas residential customers are paying above the national average? And commercial customers are also well below national average. This is all traced back to the loss of the Consumer Utility Council and the unfair playing field that is happening at the PSC. And efforts to restore the Consumer Utility Council seemed on track. We have a friendly senator, Senator Chuck Hufstetler, who introduced legislation to restore it. And that legislation got out of committee in 2024 and 25 and 26. It was approved and voted out of committee, where it actually got to the Senate floor in 2024. But Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones didn't let it get a vote. I don't know if anyone remembers last year's session, but Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones adjourned it bizarrely early. I think it was 8 p.m. when usually the last day of the session goes till midnight. So at 8 p.m., a whole bunch of bills died, and this was one of them. Then this year, State Senator Matt Brass killed it by not letting it out of his Rules Committee. So that is only for one reason. The reason is Georgia Power and their heavy lobbying presence and heavy power at the legislature. So we have very low rates for data centers. The second big reason that data centers are flocking to Georgia is that the legislature passed sales tax exemptions. Now, a lot of people will say incentives or they'll say breaks. Those words don't convey the size of this exemption, which is 100%. Since 2018, data centers have not had to pay any taxes on computer equipment, Ethernet, cords, servers, all the expensive stuff they fill those giant data center warehouses with. Zero taxes. Wouldn't you like to buy an expensive iPhone or your next laptop with zero state tax and local taxes? That's what they're getting. And the wizard behind the curtain is Georgia Power. They're the Oz. They're actually controlling the governor. They control a lot of people at the legislature. That is not clear. But here's one way to clarify it for you. A couple of years ago, Governor Kemp's chief of staff left the governor's office to become a senior vice president at Georgia Power. And this kind of rotating door happens all the time with staff leaving, coming and going, the governor appointing people. There's a lot of villainy that's going on with the Republican leadership and Georgia Power. And Georgia Power has 35 lobbyists at the Capitol. I spent an hour last week counting them up and looking at this. It is bizarre how many more lobbyists. 3 dozen lobbyists, are you kidding? And number 2 is not even close. A distant second comes in with our transit agency, MARTA. After MARTA's 20, everybody is under 10, if not under 5. And so that's why these pieces of legislation aren't working at the legislature where they should be. So there were efforts to repeal the data center tax breaks. I showed you that Kemp vetoed it in 2024. This man, Senator Brass, didn't let it out of committee in 2025. And then this man, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, killed it this year with another one of his gamesmanship, bizarrely adjourning the Senate early. The day this bill was supposed to get a vote, the Senate adjourned at like 2 p.m. Like a kindergartner, like I'm taking my toys and going home. I don't think I can win this game, so I'm just going to quit. Instead of letting the legislation get a vote and having the chips fall where they may, he adjourns the Senate. But people knew it. He didn't get away with it. I will say that I despise Rick Jackson. I think he's going to be terrible if he wins. But I also despise Burt Jones, so I don't know what to say. He's gone. I think people saw through his data center support, which he pretended to deny in the later stages of his candidacy. But people knew there were these headlines that I have on this slide. He had a massive project that he wanted on his own land. He did not support any regulation of data centers. He canceled the bills as I showed you. So, and I did a lot of these kind of posts. I can't take credit for him losing the primary runoff, but I did a lot of these posts and I saw a lot of other people besides me making sure that voters knew Burt Jones's role in data centers. So I think the backlash going on right now is fast and furious, and it's the wind beneath our sails for us to win these elections this year. So because of those bills that did not pass, the data center tax cuts are now enormous because there's so many data centers coming here. So when this bill was first passed in 2018, it was a few $100 million. This year, data centers will cost the state of Georgia $2.5 billion in lost state taxes. And next year, it's estimated to be $3 billion. Just an absolute scandal. And then this is what happened because the Republicans cut income taxes. Governor Kemp's our positive budget, our balanced budget is now broken. And so in order to balance the budget, which is a law in Georgia, they had to cut these programs. No summer food aid for children, veterans homeless. I mean, these headlines couldn't be any more out villainous out of like a Harry Potter book. No food stamps, foster care cuts, while data centers get billions in tax breaks. The evilness behind this is just, I can't use enough strong words. And
Mm.
people are angry. You can see the headlines. The failure to act on data center legislation has drawn community ire. And the one on the right, 20 pieces of legislation were filed. Everybody knew that data centers are a problem that needed to be solved. Legislators tried, but it's really the leadership that's creating the problem. It's Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, Governor Kemp. They're both gone now, but there's some that aren't gone that we need to get next. Then besides the legislature falling down on their job, the Public Service Commission is falling down on its job. They adopted rules in 2025. I don't know how many of you read the news closely on this. Most of you probably don't. But the rules they claim are in place to protect customers, you are weak enough, you could drive a Mack truck through. Look at the language I've highlighted in red here. You can see that the company, which the company is referred to as Georgia Power, that's how the PSC calls Georgia Power the company. They may require additional terms and conditions. May is not shall, which means they may not. If they deem it appropriate, are you kidding me? Then they're not going to deem it appropriate to ensure the company covers all costs. What they're doing is transitioning or cost shifting, as it's otherwise known, data center costs onto residential and small business customers because we have no lobby protection or consumer advocate. So it's already been proven. It came out in hearings last month. Big headlines that data centers aren't paying for the fuel, for the gas that they're causing to go up in price. We are. I didn't get a slide for that in here, but there is definite news on that and there is proof on that. And by the way, I have sent some of that proof to Senator Ossoff, who kicked off a federal investigation on data center cost shifting back in April. So I'm hoping that they'll intercede since we can't get the state to at this point. So yeah, so data centers would be fools not to come here. They get no rates, low rates, no taxes, no rules. And they're no fools. Of course they're going to come here. That's why Georgia is #1 for data center pipelines. Virginia has more of them right now, but ours, we will surpass them if all the data centers that Georgia Power is recruiting to come here, come here. And our rates are going to be even enormous. The next rate case is in 2028, and it is a scary thing to contemplate given the billions of dollars Georgia Power is spending on data centers while we have no protections in place. So one of the things I want to make sure people understand is that fighting data centers at the county level is not enough. The state of Georgia has to repeal that tax break, the subsidies. They have to restore the Consumer Utility Council so we have fairness at the commission. And they have to require data centers to pay for all their own grid costs. All the legislation that Burt Jones and Matt Grass and Kemp have killed, and Don Parsons, I'll talk about him in a second, need to pass. So, you know, a lot of citizens are confused. They think their county commissioners are the bad guys, they're the dogs, but they're not. Some of them certainly are. They should not be voting to rezone agricultural land. Data centers belong in industrial parks and in urban areas, not in the countryside. But commissioners are reacting to the state rules, the state incentives. They're victims to some degree as well, because all they can do is react to what the state has set up for them. And the backlash has been fierce, it has been intense, and it is in our favor, to be honest. Because what if we can do this at the PSC, which you see that headline, and I'm sure everyone on this call knows, we won 2 seats last November in landslide numbers, decisive 25 points. That's how badly the incumbents lost to Democratic candidates. So what you need to do to begin with is understand the incentives as I've explained them, identify who's behind them, Georgia Power's behind them, and then remove the legislators from office who are stooges for Georgia Power. So it is not that hard to remove people from office. I mean, okay, it is hard. This was 16 months of work, but we did it. We got rid of the 3 commissioners you see on the left, 2 last November, 1 in May for the primary, and then we'll go after the remaining 2 in their election. But here's a rundown of our successes. We got rid of Commissioner Fitz Johnson last November. We got rid of Commissioner Tim Echols last November. Commissioner Pridemore lost her primary bid in May. She was running for Congressional District 11 because she knew she couldn't win a seat on the commission, not after what she saw with Fitz and Tim. And she lost that. We went after her pretty hard too. We did not let her escape our ire. And then Burt Jones just lost his primary runoff in June with a lot of anti-data center posting on social media and outreach to voters statewide. And then the remaining 2, now we're after Matt Brass for all the things I showed you he did. And we're after Representative Don Parsons this November. That's our short list. If we can, of course, we want every Democrat to win, all candidates. We want to flip the House. We want to flip the Senate. We want Governor Keisha Lance Bottoms to win and Ossoff. But this is, if we can get these seats, in addition to the 4 we've gotten, it would be a shot across the bow in terms of energy and data centers, because the message that would be given to the legislature that they wouldn't be able to ignore is that if you carry the water for data centers and Georgia Power, you're gone. So Matt Brass is next. This is him. He chairs the Powerful Rules Committee. He takes tens of thousands of dollars from Georgia Power and utility interest and then delivers for them. I was at this hearing. This was a packed room. People were standing along the walls. It was such an important meeting, and for the legislation that we needed passed for data centers, which was Senate Bill 34, which he killed. And then Don Parsons chairs the House Energy and Utilities Committee. He also takes tons of money from Georgia Power, and he has killed every solar energy bill that comes before his committee. It does not get out of committee. He doesn't even let it get a vote. And he supports all of Georgia Power's priorities in terms of blocking data center bills and blocking ending the tax incentives. So I don't have a list of his legislation killing activities in this deck, but if anyone wants it, I have it documented. Just let me know. So yeah, he's blocking solar. He's supporting data center legislation that does not regulate them. So both of these guys need to lose their seats, and then we would be able to get the energy and utility regulations and legislation that we need. So especially we need to tie Brass's defeat to data centers, because he in particular has been the strongest supporter of Georgia Power. And it's important that people know when he loses, why he loses, but we'll take care of that. In terms of no clean energy, I said I would get to that later. Here it is. Georgia Power is expanding carbon emissions in massive amounts. There have been a lot of headlines on this, so if people are well read, you already know this headline. Georgia Power's massive data center expansion includes a lot of gas. There's been other headlines. Here's another one inside Climate News. Georgia Power's gas expansion would drive significant climate damage and pollution. This subheading is really scary to me. The expansion would add millions of tons of carbon pollution annually while polluting the air near vulnerable communities, which is where they put these plants, right? Near Black and brown communities and poor communities, people that don't have political power and can't fight them off. That's where these gas plants are going. 5 new enormous gas plants. And we just found out about 3 weeks ago that Georgia Power wants another 6 gigawatts of gas approved at the commission before the end of the year. That is, I know most people may not know what a gigawatt is. That is uh, each Vogtle reactor is 1 gigawatt. So the fact that they want 6 is the equivalent of 6 Vogtle nuclear reactors, but it's gas. So not only are fossil fuels expensive, but the devastation to the environment is expensive. Hurricane Helene devastated the state of Georgia in September of 2024, costing billions of dollars in property damage, causing dozens of deaths, including a young mother with twin-month-old babies. All 3 of them drowned to death in Georgia during Hurricane Helene. And so it's not only property damage, it's life. But then Georgia Power spent $1 billion fixing the grid, which was broken in massive ways from the really strong hurricane. That $1 billion came before the commission last month in May. The commission and staff were able to get that huge number reduced to about 800 million, in part because Georgia Power was gaming the accounting books, putting labor cost into capital, which they get profits on capital, but they do not get reimbursed for labor. So the commission made them take several hundred million out of that and put that where it belonged. So, but all that to say, rates went up in June 5% to pay for Hurricane Helene, while the governor and the commissioners are saying, "Oh, your bills are going, rates are going down." That's a lie. Your bill was going down a little bit, but the rates went up, and the only reason the bill went down a little bit, and by a little bit I mean $4 a month, after a $60 a month increase over the last 2 years. But okay, the $4 a month decline was also accounting gamesmanship, where they just took some federal tax rebates they got, which by the way is our money, and reduced the bill $4 a month because they knew a 7th rate increase in 3 years, 3 years, was a non-starter. So they didn't do it. But the rate increase, when they're done with their accounting gamesmanship with that federal tax money, the rate increase will come back full on and will still be there for a long time. And that's how expensive fossil fuels are. That's not even all, but that's all I have time for right now. So what is our power? What can you do about it? It's in elections. Help Representative Don Parsons lose the election. We have a great candidate against him, Danielle Bell. I think she's going to win because she was within 5,000 votes of the primary. Help Senator Brass lose the election. He's done so much damage to our bills and affordability and to data centers. He's got to go. And then we need to reelect Peter Hubbard because he was elected last November, but it was just for a 1-year term. He was filling a vacancy. And we need to elect Sheila Edwards to get that 3rd seat. If we can have 3 Democrats on the Public Service Commission, then there is a lot they can do. They can reduce Georgia Power's enormous profits. Georgia Power makes profits far above utility industry norms. If they made profits just what they should be making at utility norms, our bills would go down 20%. That's how much the fatted calf is that the commission has given Georgia Power. It is bizarre and ludicrous. There's a lot more they can do. I have a whole list of, I think I stopped at 10, but I could do 20 of the many policies and decisions that Peter, Sheila, and Dr. Alicia Johnson could make that would save us money, that would clean up the air and stop the pollution, that would also save us money because there's nothing cheaper than renewable energy. Solar energy, wind, and battery storage are all far less expensive than gas. but Georgia Power is just choosing gas and coal because it profits them more and the commission allows it. It's really hard to watch. It is really hard for me to watch, but I do get some, well, not some, a lot of satisfaction out of our wins with the commission last year, Tricia Pridemore and Burt Jones this year. So if we can just get Matt Brass and Parsons, then that will really be a great day. What else you can do? Stay informed, sign up for my energy and data center focused newsletter, engage with the DeKalb Dems. They're doing a lot of great work, or your local county committee if it's not DeKalb. Take the pledge to vote on my website. It's just on the landing page. Just go to my website and scroll down, and then we will remind you when to vote. We will help you with who to vote for and where to vote, all of that. Just take the pledge, and then you don't have to worry about it after that. Donate to candidates if you have any capacity at all. It doesn't need to be a lot of money. Of course, if you have a lot, donate a lot. But if you don't, throw $20, $25 their way because the number of donors is just as important as the amount. If they can show dozens or hundreds of donors, that is a big deal for candidates. The media will take your candidacy more seriously. Those little dollars add up. And it also feels good to know that you have a lot of support because running for office is hard. It's thankless. Nobody's paying you. Usually you're spending a lot of money because you're not working, you're not doing paid work, you're running for office and nobody's paying you to do that. So that is another reason to do it, is just because it's a way to say thank you for stepping up. Thank you for giving me a choice. Thank you for doing this. And then volunteer. Whether you have money or not, do some postcard writing or some phone banking or whatever else they might need. If you've got skills, you like Canva, make some graphics for them, things like that. Both all these candidates have ways to volunteer, or a sign up form on their website, I should say. Um, so the other thing, if there's time, if Karen wants me to, I do have a recording of Dan O'Toole, who's kind of a data guru and has done some analysis of the election data that I could play. It's about 3 minutes. If
Yes.
you want me to do that, Karen, I'll pull that up, or we can do Q&A and then do that.
Yes, I have a couple of questions, and then if you would pull up the information from Dan, that
Okay.
would be great. So, you talked a lot about Georgia Power and their lobbying. Would it be possible, we as citizens, that we could prohibit Georgia Power's lobbying and contributions?
Yeah, it should be. It's more than possible. It is bizarre to me that a monopoly that the people of Georgia have granted to Georgia Power through the legislature is then allowed to spend money exploiting the very monopoly they are entrusted with. In my opinion, given what I've seen over the last 60 years, they should lose their monopoly franchise. But that's not likely to happen because then there's a lot of cost involved. But what should happen is legislation that prohibits all lobbying. So stop the lobbying. Of course, they can speak in testimony and hearings, just like anybody else can, and be expert witnesses, but not lobby. And stop contributing. That is absolutely what should happen. And there's more that should happen. A key piece of legislation that I tried to get passed with my lobby partner, Andrea Jones at Georgia Wand, is to change how Georgia Power is compensated, because they're compensated the more they spend, the more profits they make. They're not compensated for saving money or reducing rates or clean energy or engaging customers in the energy marketplace, which now there's a very robust marketplace because of the internet, but we're not allowed to participate in it because Georgia Power blocks us. So it's called performance-based regulating. And so and they're given performance metrics to meet. So it could be clean energy, lower rates, or engage in consumers. It could be walk my dog and bake me a cake. It can be whatever we decide because we're the ones that granted them the monopoly that gives them guaranteed profits and captive customers. We should expect something back from that, and we get to decide what that is, the people of Georgia. So if Democrats gain control, as we all hope, that is the first thing that should happen.
So to clarify, we would have to ask our legislators to pass
Yeah,
legislation that
yeah,
would prohibit the lobbying and
yeah,
contributions. Am I understanding you correctly
that's
with?
correct. Yep.
Okay. Now, my other question is, is it true that Georgia Power currently um, purchases homes or destroys homes to build data centers? Is that a true statement?
Yeah, that's not exactly right, but it's directionally right. I don't know how many of you heard about Beyonce that came out this April where Georgia Power was going to allow data centers to bring their own clean energy. So BYONCE, bring your own clean energy was nicknamed Beyonce. And I thought, wow, that is really PR savvy. They're very PR savvy. They can get the headlines they want, and I can see how they're manipulating it. But what I've seen last month and now this month is Georgia Power condemning land through eminent domain in Coweta County for data centers. And most people don't realize the state legislature also has passed a law, a very old law, it's 100 years old, giving utilities the power of eminent domain. It is time for that law to stop because a private for-profit corporation should not be able to condemn land for a private for-profit corporation like a data center. But just to be clear, Georgia Power isn't condemning land for data centers like to build. What they are doing is condemning land from homeowners who don't want to offer or sell a lease or a lien for them to put a high voltage transmission line on their land. All the data centers, of course, they're buying their own land, they're building their own building. That's not to do nothing to do with Georgia Power, but to serve them with electricity and gas, Georgia Power has to have huge transmission lines added, and they got over 1,000 miles of high voltage. And by high voltage, I mean those big ones that go through clear cut corridors. The poles themselves are the size of a massive built 20-foot build 20 level building. It is so big, a human male standing beside the pole looks very tiny. I wish I'd have put a picture of it in this deck. And so, yeah, people aren't wanting those things near their homes. So they deny Georgia Power, and then Georgia Power is condemning it. And the reason I mentioned Beyonce is I think it's a critical PR mistake on their part that they're making. I don't know why they're doing that in an election year. The only thing I can think of is arrogance or hubris. They just think, well, we're just going to do what we always do, which is whatever we want. No one's going to stop us, and they're not wrong. But it's just weird that they're not handling it better. So yes, the answer is they are doing that. And it's highly disturbing, but I think it's gonna hurt them. We're gonna make it hurt them.
Okay, another question I have is, okay, if you do not get your bill from Georgia Power, how does all the actions Georgia Power has going on impact other energy companies?
Yeah, like EMCs, electric membership cooperatives, and
Yes.
MEAGs and municipal, yeah, everybody's affected by what Georgia Power does. In large part, well, for two reasons. Georgia Power sells energy to MEAG, to munis, if you're Noonan Utilities, for example, or Marietta Utilities, and it sells power to EMC. So if you're Cobb EMC, or, there's hundreds of Pine EMC, Jackson EMC, all of them. Those entities buy very expensive, dirty power from Georgia Power. So if your concern is high bills or your concern is clean energy, you're still being impacted by Georgia Power. But it's even more glaringly clear now because Georgia Power is harming rural Georgians where most EMCs serve because of data centers. And if Georgia Power gets everything they want, this state is going to be scarred with thousands of miles of high voltage transmission and data centers everywhere. Because let's just be clear, data centers flocking to Georgia is all about Georgia Power. They're the ones behind this legislation passing and failing. This is big business. This is billions of dollars in profits for them. There is nothing they would love more than to have this entire state covered in data centers. And there is another slide I'm realizing I missed from a large load development report that Georgia Power filed with the PSC last month. Someone sent it to me, and my mind is blown because in that report, Georgia Power claims that they have 76 gigawatts of data center business that they're discussing contracts for. And let me be clear, the entire size of Georgia Power's grid right now is 14 gigawatts. So 76 is 5 times larger. It is an order of magnitude that is just gobsmacking. Like the cost that would be and the harm that would cause and the damage to the environment from all the gas and coal that they're choosing to use would Georgia will never be the same. So this is all about Georgia Power. That's how it's impacting you, whether you're a Georgia Power customer or not. So these votes that we're asking you to make are of critical importance, whether you're a customer or not.
My last question is, so you mentioned if Peter Hubbard is reelected, because he was only elected for one term, and Sheila Edwards is elected, and then we have one other commissioner that was elected. What type of things would they be able to do with a majority on the PSC? You said there were lots of things that they would be able to accomplish. What are
Yeah, absolutely. A key one is the return on equity. Georgia Power receives a return on equity of almost 12%, and the average utility is 9.5%. That might not sound like a lot, but those 2.5% difference delivers 800 million to almost $1 billion in profits, excess profits, not total, just excess for Georgia Power every year. And they've had that since 2019 when Plant Vogtle started, well, not started, it's went over cost overruns all along, but they've had that for a long time. And so that is one, that is the real reason behind the rate freeze that happened last year. Georgia Power acted like it was for us. It was never for us. It was to lock in that bizarre return on equity, because now that Vogtle is done, there's no reason for them to have such a high return on equity. And so it was job one was going to be reducing that to industry norms, and they don't want to do that. So similar to Burt Jones adjourning the Senate early, they just said, hey, we're going to freeze rates and cancel this rate proceeding. And by that, that meant not only did we not have the opportunity to lower their profits, but we never have an opportunity. We do not have an opportunity to examine their spending on data center gas plants until 2028, years later, when it's too late to make adjustments or to stop anything. It was a real Trojan horse for them. That's one thing. There are other things Peter, Alicia, and Sheila can do. Like right now, I guess everyone knows LED lighting is a huge advancement. LED bulbs use 80% less energy than incandescent. And all of Georgia's cities were bulbs, and all these street lights, which are very expensive, were swapped out 10 years ago from the old style bulbs, sulfur and LED, not LED, sulfur and incandescent, compact fluorescent, all those, to LEDs. Instead of passing along the 80% savings, Georgia Power kept that difference and has kept it for 10 years, charging cities the same, even though the cost is a fraction of what it was. That's because the commission allowed it. So the new commissioners would put a stop to that. And then there's a lot of very anti-consumer, bizarre practices going on at the commission. Data center cost shifting is happening. There are also, gosh, the rates aren't on our bills, so people can't see that they're paying a huge gas surcharge, and there's no prorating. So your summer rates are about double what your winter rates are. And so if your billing cycle goes one day, like let's say your billing cycle is May 3rd through June 1st, that one day in June, Georgia Power will not prorate. They bill your whole May bill cycle at the higher June rates. There are innumerable policies like that Sheila, Alicia, and Peter would put a stop to. I mean, there are many, and I am going to do a flyer on that because I think people really want to know what can they do. And also all the gas that has been approved, that was approved last December. Peter has a very strong energy expert filing he made showing that gas is not needed and it's not affordable and these other solutions are cheaper. The commissioners ignored him, of course, and now he's on the commission. They still get to ignore him because the corporate commissioners, as I call them, have a majority 3-2. If we get that third seat, we can stop that gas.
So, as Patty shared with us this evening, we really have the power as voters. We just have to get out and do the work so that we elect legislators that are working for us instead of for corporations. And we
Yeah.
elect legislators that are going to improve our lives, and make sure that the money that we are spending monthly on our utility bills are really, the kind of things that help us, and not just going to profits for the corporations. So, as we, you know, ask people to do a lot and volunteer, this is just, a good reason to get involved. Um, Patty's going to share some of the information that Dan shared with us earlier about what the turnout was during the primary and what it needs to be so that we can get people elected that are going to help us.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting and exciting message. It's definitely not one that we can just do nothing. Once you hear the message, it'll make sense to you. But it also means we have to do some work, but I'd rather know than not know. So I'm gonna share this with you now. This is Dan O'Toole and it's about 3 minutes. So I'm gonna play it and stop for a second to make sure you can hear it.
Uh, this
Oh, that's too low. Let me try that again.
is a little frustrating, but
How does that sound? Can you hear it?
Yes.
this was again kind of a name ID and lower voter education down ballot type election.
So he's talking about the primary. It was a name ID, low name ID down ballot election during the primary.
The proof of that being the two Supreme Court races. So a lot of people don't know that on your Democratic ballot are Republicans for in these judicial races. And although I mean, I got 3 pieces of mail from, I guess, ACLU and a couple others about Jen Jordan and Miracle Rankin and then Wooten, I forget his first name. But overall, that didn't, they did better than normal, but overall, they still didn't win. So now we have Republicans still packed on our highest courts. And again, that's kind of an education thing. A lot of voters don't really know what's going on down ballot. They tend to do name ID, and absent that, they tend to vote for incumbents. And that sucks. Um, the higher Democratic turnout shows that there's a bit of an enthusiasm gap because typically there's more Republicans. We had more, I think, really competitive primaries than they did overall, which may be a small effect, but we did very well. Going into November, Trump's not on the ballot, which helps us a lot because there's a lot of Trump only voters. We so going into November, we have this persistent in Georgia 50 to 150,000 vote shortfall. The enthusiasm gap will help close some of that. What the candidates themselves do will help close some of that. But the other interesting thing is when you look at a presidential year and you look at a primary year, there's usually about a 200,000 vote shortfall overall, or more. I got to go double check that number. But with that to say, actually, I think it's more than that. If we got every VP Harris voter, everyone who voted for Kamala a year and a half ago, if we could just turn all of them back out in November, we would blow literally every single one of these races away. Even non-competitive races would be flipping over to us. So, one of the things I'm working on, and hopefully some of the other candidates are as well, is closing that gap, identifying those voters, and getting them turned back out in November, because that's really what's going to determine whether or not we win or not statewide. Duncan was going around saying, "Oh, I can get independents and disaffected Republicans and Democrats," and it's like Republicans aren't going to vote for Democrats. They're just too locked in. Same way Democrats are mostly locked in. It's really just the fight is between, as some people say, the couch and actually voting. So people who stay home versus people who go out and vote. And that's kind of what we're focused on this year.
So that's the message that Dan had, I think resonated a lot with me and Karen. It's the couch versus voting, and it's identifying and getting Kamala Harris voters out to vote. Because Trump's not on the ballot, so Republicans will have a big drop off. This is our chance. I think this is our chance for that reason. I think it's also our chance because Georgia Power fumbling on the land condemnation and the Republicans fumbling on data center legislation. I think we have a chance to take some wins that we normally would never see this year, but it's going to take some work. We have 4.5 months left, 4 months next week, because July 3rd is next week. And that's 4 months from November to November 3rd. So that's all I have. Thank you for having me, Karen. Back over to you.
Yeah, there's another question that I
Okay,
have.
great.
It says, if there is an AI bubble, as a lot of analysts think, is there a risk that Georgia Power is seeking permits for power plants to supply data centers that will never be built?
It is a huge risk, absolutely 100%. That is one reason that I am very upset over the rate freeze, pushing the next rate case to 2028, because now they could do all that spending without us having a chance to stop it. The term that is behind that question is called a stranded asset. It's an asset that's built that's not needed, meaning it's stranded. So who's going to pay for it? Well, we are, because we have a commission that is in regulatory capture, a commission that answers to Georgia Power instead of Georgia Power answering to it. And the only way to fix that is to get that third seat. That's why I dedicate almost every second of my life when I can to these seats, because I want to see the commission be what it should be, which is work for the people of Georgia. And I want Brass and Parsons gone, because the message that would send to the legislature, even if we don't flip it, which I hope we do, would mean we get the legislation we need and this Republican nonsense stops. So yeah, it is very much at risk. It is very scary. The amount of money in play here is so vast that actually Southern Company, the parent of Georgia Power, the financial equities researcher reports have listed Georgia Power as a risk for Southern Company stock because of the billions they're spending with really out any regulatory controls. So their stock price is depressed. That's how good your question is to wonder, because it is very much a risk for everybody.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us this evening.
My pleasure.
We are charged and ready to go forward with information. And everybody who sees this or hears about this webinar, please share this information with your friends and colleagues and neighbors and everybody you know, so that we can get people to understand. We need all hands on deck to get people elected who are
Yes.
going to be helping us. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.